I almost feel like I'm at this like age and point in my life where I've like built up so much responsibility at home that if I do that, all that's gonna go to shit.
Like the most famous, and I think the name that people like love that I say all the time is Snoop Dogg, probably.
Do you feel like you've ever experienced like self-doubt in those moments or like imposter syndrome?
Like to the date of when I wrote I'm gonna sign with an agency in LA and get my visa, and to the date, like the exact date, it's come true.
Today we have Alessandra on the podcast. Like I was saying, I know Alessandra's story obviously because she's family. She's Roman's cousin, and I know that she moved from Ottawa to LA to pursue her dreams in dance and entrepreneurship and all of that. And it's always been an inspiration to me when I hear about these stories. I've always talked to Fran about it and been like, it's super cool that like she was just able to do that, knowing that her family's here and have that support system behind her. And as we're kind of fostering more conversations on the podcast surrounding like vulnerability and like how people got to where they were, that's why we thought you would be the perfect person to have on. So yeah, that's kind of why we want to have you on. That's whole spiel there. But
Thank you.
I want to get into it with some of these
Questions. Yeah. So first of all, nice to meet. I don't think we've met before.
I don't know. I don't think we have.
I don't think so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
I
don't
didn't.
think so.
No, I've heard so much about you, but
It's
I
weird.
don't think
'cause,
I've
yeah,
met.
I feel like I know you for sure, but I don't think we ever have actually met in person, which is crazy. I feel like I
Yeah,
know
it
you,
is
though.
crazy. But anyways, nice to meet you.
Oh, for sure.
As Sam was saying, I've like seen your TikToks too. You're like an amazing dancer. Sam always talks to me about how your story, like she was saying. And I guess my first question is, what inspired you to make that move and make that transition to follow your dream? Because like I've had the thought of like, yeah, I want to move, but then I get anxiety even just like the thought of me leaving my family or leaving something like a comfort zone to me, which would be my hometown. But at the end of the day, it's just a bubble, right? So what made you want to like pop that bubble and make the move? And what was like that exact moment you're like, that's it, like I'm leaving?
It had been brewing for a long time as well, I think. And just like a bit about my story and to kind of go to how I got there to begin with, I actually went to school for biochemistry. I was supposed to be a dentist. I was actually like applied to dentistry school, got accepted. I was a month before starting actually, so a dentistry school is kind of like med school, would have been an extra 4 years after my degree. And
Wait, so I knew you got a degree, but you actually were going to become a dentist?
yeah, and I was fully accepted and everything. Yeah, so I have a degree in biochem, and so that was my path for as long as I can remember. And even in high school, I was like, oh, I'm going to be a dentist. Like that was I loved science and I wanted a good job. So I was like, oh, like I feel like dentistry would be a great like leading after science. Anyway, so yeah, I was a month before starting, and I had this just itching, like a intuitive calling always that it wasn't really what was right for me, and I didn't actually have any passion in it at all, and it's not what I really wanted to do. And I always had that calling, but I kind of just like silenced it. And I think, to be completely honest, my entire life I always wanted to be a professional dancer. I wanted to pursue dance, but I never really believed in myself, to be honest, like my whole life. And also I also had societal pressures of like, oh, that's not a good job, like starving artist. It's not. And it's true. I mean, it's definitely not. There's other avenues that are way more lucrative. Like dance is definitely not the best in that sense. But I just had this intuitive calling, and honestly, it's kind of silly, but I think a month before I was supposed to start, I put little sticky notes all over my house at home, and one was like, go to LA and be a dancer, and one was like dentistry, and I was like trying to like, okay, if I just like pick one, literally that's what I was doing. That's what I'll do. But I eventually just got real with myself, and I knew that I did not want to go to dentistry, so I declined dentistry school. But at that time, I still wasn't confident enough in myself that I wanted to move to LA. I was still also kind of in a more comfort zone. I felt lost. I knew that I didn't want to stay in Canada either, but I was just feeling very lost. And even though like deep down, I knew that I wanted to go to LA and pursue dance, but I still wasn't quite there yet. And then I moved to Australia for a year, and that's when me and my sister went together. And that kind of solidified while I was there. Actually, I worked for Lululemon when I was living in Canada too, like while I was in university. Yeah, and they actually have this, they make all their employees listen to this. It's called a success psychology kind of program, and they make all their employees listen to that because the founder of Lululemon, actually that like changed his life. And I had listened to it before when I was in Ottawa, but it didn't really like fully register, but I listened to it again when I was in Australia, and it really makes you think of like your life, like what you really want for your life. And I think it just resonated so deeply when I was in Australia. And I remember calling my parents. I'd only been in Australia for like 2 months. And I'm like, I'm going to LA. Like after this year is done, like I'm finally doing it. Like I'm finally gonna believe in myself. And I remember I wrote down like all the goals that I wanted to accomplish, and almost all of them came true. And at the time, I did not think they were all possible. But so I think, to answer your question of like what finally burst the bubble, is it wasn't just an instant kind of thing. Like it was a long process. And I think it was just like peeling back all the layers of what people tell me, like society, and finally finding like my true inner voice and actually listening to my gut and really believing in that, and like deciding, like finally deciding. I honestly like deciding, but it took a long time to get there and to finally listen to that and have the confidence to listen
If you
to it.
if you don't mind me asking, how old were you when you actually moved to LA?
Oh my God, it was 2016. So, oh my goodness, I'm like quick math. I would have been, I think I was 21, 22, 20. I think I was 23 when I moved to LA. Yeah. I think I was 23, 24. I think 23 turning 24. Yeah, that's
Which
exactly.
is which is crazy because I feel like mid 20s, I guess I'm kind of late 20s now, but mid 20s to late 20s, you're still kind of like everyone's like figuring out what they want to do, and like you almost have two sides where it's like one side's pulling you to like what you're supposed to do and what you went to university for, or like what society deems as successful. Like you need to be making a salary, it's secure, like you have benefits, you need to have a mortgage, blah blah blah. And then there's the other side of things, which is like everyone has that one passion that they want to pursue, but it's like you said, it's a limiting belief where you're like, I need to trust myself that I'll actually be able to do it. And I think that's what a lot of people face. Like we face it too with the
Mm.
podcast. Like there's so many different areas that I feel like we could even go if we moved somewhere or like traveled or explored, but it's like that block that's blocking us and like a lot of other people out there. It's like believing in yourself and like trusting in the universe, right? Which
Yeah,
you did.
absolutely. Absolutely. But I think it's also like on a more realistic point of view, like I think I'm very fortunate in that I know that if I knew that if I failed and if I like, if I was like broke and homeless, like I would never just be on the streets. You know, like I have a family net, like, and I think that's a realistic thing to talk about too. And I'm like fortunate in that way that not everyone has that. And like, I do know that I have that safety net. I luckily never had to do that. Like it all worked out. But I think having that, knowing that, okay, like if everything fails, like I can go home and be back with my family, like having that safety net. And not everyone is, again, like fortunate enough to have that. So I think it's like also being smart as well and knowing like worst case scenario, kind of having a bit of a plan for that. And mine was always like, okay, like worst case scenario, I moved back home. Like, oh well, at least I tried. And I think for some people, maybe the safety net can be like, okay, like maybe they don't fully, let's say for example, someone really wants to like change careers, and instead of just like completely just going cold turkey and switching everything, maybe still having like that job and doing it on the side until it makes like depending on your situation. I think we have to be realistic as well. Like I think, of course, have these big dreams and believe in yourself and like go all in 100%. But I think also being realistic of like what's the worst possible case scenario at the same time, and having
So
that.
true.
I
Yeah.
feel like people don't talk about that enough either. It's like, yeah, follow your dreams and like believe in yourself, but like if you do have a safety net or like a backup plan, it's always good to note that like like we said on social media, it's unrealistic to like look at someone and be like, oh my god, how would they do that? It's like, okay, they have family support, they have all that. Some people don't have that, and then B, having that backup plan. It could even be as simple as like you get an education or like you get
Mhm.
a college degree, and it's like you have that degree if you need to just like go back to work, sort of thing. So that's important to know.
I want to follow up. This is oh sorry, this is not the outline, I don't think, but how did you adjust to like life in LA after being in Ottawa? Like was there like a culture shock slash did you like struggle not to fit in, but to kind of find your way? Like was it easy for you? Because I think about myself, and I was actually talking to Mikey about this because he went to Australia, I think, and he was saying how like I feel like your brother's so, like, bubbly and interpersonal, and I was like, I feel like I could never do that because 'cause I'm more, like, reserved, and it takes me a while, so, like, the thought of me going to a different country and, like, meeting new friends and trying to kind of find my way scares me, but how did you find that process?
Yeah, I actually, I think I'm like almost the complete opposite. I've always really loved traveling and leaving I actually felt in like an opposite way more comfortable in going in the unknown and like going to new places. And it almost, I think in a weird way, it felt like I could be whoever I wanted to be. And I felt more constrained. I felt more constrained and like limited in my hometown sometimes. And I felt like I couldn't just go like do everything that I wanted to do or be completely the person that I wanted to be because of people's expectations or just like friend circles and just constraints. I don't know. So I always actually resonated a lot more with going somewhere else and kind of it being a blank slate and you get to like
I've
create
never looked at it
whatever.
that way.
Yeah, you get to
Me
create like
neither.
whatever you want. I've always, yeah, that's why I always love to travel. Honestly, I think when I like think back to it, why I first started like loving travel is because it felt like I could be whoever I wanted to be, and I could actually. There was like a blank slate. There was no expectations. So
So true. There's no like bias. There's no people know what you've done and who you are. Like it's just you're literally
Yeah.
reinventing yourself.
There's like no LinkedIn. Like,
Yeah, there's no like
like,
link to you. You're just like I'm new, like hi,
yeah,
like you know.
yeah. But I mean, I
um,
do. I also am like I would say I'm also pretty extroverted. Like I love meeting new people, and so that
Yeah.
I never felt scared in that way. To be completely honest, yeah, yeah.
going back to you moving to pursue dance from Ottawa to LA, what
Mhm.
was the pivotal moment when you actually got there and got your first opportunity, or like a notable moment that you look back on, you're like, holy shit, that's kind of when things changed?
Yeah, it was actually pretty soon. It was in my first year there, actually. I was judging for a dance competition in Mexico, and I there was an audition that I was missing, and I got back and I like just went to the audition even though it kind of already was happening, and I just went up to the guy and I was like, "Can I still come to the callback even though I missed the morning?" And he was like, "Sure, just like learn the routine." And I ended up booking that job, and that was like my first. It was for like this like the choreographer was a really notable choreographer. It's actually like Britney Spears' choreographer. His name is Brian Friedman. And it wasn't like that big of a job, but it was just like a big choreographer at the time and it was my first time ever booking like a job like that from an audition. And I also like wasn't even supposed to be there. And it was within my first like 6 months being there. And I remember that, oh my God, that was just the best feeling in the world. And I also, cause most people wouldn't have even showed up. Like they're like, oh, I already missed it, like whatever. And I was like in my mindset then, I was hustling and I was willing to do whatever. And so I think that's when I was like, oh my God, like this is really real. I can really do this. So that was a huge
And
moment
like,
for sure.
I feel like also it's worth the hustle because you genuinely loved it. Like, you're like, this is
Mm-hmm.
what I came here for. It's like hard to relate when you don't actually love what you're doing. People are like, oh my God, like they're dreading work, they're
Yeah.
dreading doing what they're doing, but you actually like really loved it, right? So
A
it
hundred
it makes
percent.
sense.
100%.
Um,
I think, sorry, just to like piggyback off that.
no,
Yeah,
no,
I
yeah.
go,
think
go, go.
though, that was like also my first kind of year there. And I will say like the longer I've been here that it like with all things, like how you're saying how people dread things. I think it's kind of like, so for example, like dance, there are also things that even now being in it for like a while, like 6 years, there are things that I dread as well. You know, like I don't think every kind of career path is like perfect where there's not going to be something you dread. There's always going to be some things that you don't really want to do. There's like, so for example, even sometimes auditioning or like networking, or there's little things that you have to, every path you go on, there's going to be something that you don't necessarily like love. And so it's like really kind of weighing the pros and cons and like, okay, like am I willing to pay the price of like these things that I don't like because I like love it so much? And because there's always going to be something that you dread towards, right? And especially the longer you stay in it. So that's, yeah.
I was gonna ask, because you said networking and like you sometimes dreading some parts of this, but again, going back to being like vulnerable and realistic, if you feel comfy answering, what are some of like the hardest parts about pursuing something? I'm calling it like non-traditional only because it's not
No,
like
it
the
isn't.
societal
No, no,
like
no, you're
9 to 5
right.
thing. So like, what is the hardest part of that? Whether it's dance, whatever it is,
Yeah.
just in general, not pursuing that traditional path. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what scares you about it? What have you overcome? And like that sort of side of things.
Yeah. So no, you're right. It's definitely non-traditional, completely. And I think the hardest part is just the inconsistency. Like it's such a roller
Mm.
coaster ride. You can't really plan that far in advance. You don't know if you have to have an audition, like you get notified the day before, or sometimes the same day. And like obviously the inconsistency of pay and just you really have to hustle and like network and all of that. And I think the hardest part has honestly been the inconsistency and also the mental inconsistency too. It's kind of like with any art, or I mean like a lot of artists and music artists, like actors feel this way too. It's like
Creatives, yeah.
when you're on a job and everything's going well, of course, like the high of that is insane. Like you feel so amazing. But then there's lulls
Mm-hmm.
as well, right? And just like
Yeah.
finding the mental kind of capacity to like keep yourself sane and keep yourself just happy and motivated throughout it all, and not letting yourself like feel the highs and lows too much, like not crashing out in that way, because it's true. Like, you feel so good when you're on a really reputable job or you're dancing for like a famous person and it's an amazing job. But then there could be like a month or two where there's like not really anything exciting at all, and just like not letting yourself get wrapped up in that. Yeah, it's the inconsistency. It's a lot. It's hard. It's definitely not for everyone, I will say. Like, it really, it's a,
I was gonna say, yeah.
yeah.
What were you gonna say?
With that, do you feel like you've ever experienced like self-doubt in those moments, or like imposter syndrome, kind of like regret, or do you feel like no, like I just pushed through it and it was like the best decision you could have made? Or do you feel sometimes like shit, like maybe like regrets or self-doubt?
I definitely feel self-doubt and regret all the time. I think it's so normal to question yourself and question things. But I will say, like, at the end, I definitely let myself go through those emotions and feel them and ride them. But I always end up coming out to like feeling like it was the right decision and being super happy with it. But of
Yeah.
course, like, there's so many times that I, when it's hard and when it's a slow month, for sure, it's like, okay, like, is this, I think about changing careers. I think about like doing all these other things. There's so much doubt that comes up, for sure. And I think I just, in those moments, I have to remind myself of like why I want to do this, why I'm here, why I love this so much, like what things I'm still working towards are, and like why I really want those, and just always reminding myself of like the why. I think that's the most important thing. But I definitely feel doubt always.
I think that's good. I think that's really good advice, because literally I was just telling my sister today I had like a shit day at work, and I was like, I just wanna, it was like one of those like low times where I'm like, what the F am I doing? Like, I don't know if I even want to be doing what I'm doing. Like, you have all these like thoughts, and what I'm doing right now isn't necessarily my end all be all, but like asking yourself why you're here and like what you're working towards, I think is the biggest thing. Cause I literally came into this podcast recording, I was like dreading the day I had, excited for this obviously, but
Yeah.
dreading the day I had. And I was just like, you can't dwell in those emotions either, because like your life shouldn't revolve around just like what you're doing for money or like professionally, right? You have to like be happy with yourself as you are,
For
just as you
sure.
are.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's easy to dwell on that though, for sure. But I think it's just reminding yourself like everything, where we focus our energy, just going to expand, right? So obviously I think it's not good to like toxic positivity and be like, oh, I'm not feeling this, JK. Like, I don't think that's,
Yeah.
I don't think that's good either. Like, toxic positivity, I think, is a thing for real as well. But
Yeah.
I think it's just important to note, like, okay, like the longer I dwell on this, just the more it's going to magnify, and it's just going to keep like I'm just going to keep attracting that, and it's just going to get bigger. And so if I can just figure out why I'm feeling this way, like accept it, and then connect myself back to, okay, like, why am I doing this, and just keep moving and keep pushing forward, but definitely not trying to pretend that those feelings aren't there, right?
Don't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, I want to shift from dance to your kind of like wellness entrepreneurship. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's what you call it, but I kind
Yeah,
of
no,
like
absolutely. That's a
looked
perfect.
at you as like
That's
a
perfect.
okay, good.
Yeah.
I was like kind of looking at you as like a wellness entrepreneur. I know you have a lot of manifestation techniques, and you've taught yoga or still teach yoga. So I kind of want to get into that and like how you even got into all of that. I think you mentioned that you did you go to India, or did
I
I say
did.
that?
No, I
You
went to
did.
India.
Okay,
Yeah, you're
okay.
right. Yeah,
Okay.
my
Can you
story
tell
is
us
like,
about that
whoop.
whole journey?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, my story's a little all over the place, but yeah, I did. I don't currently teach yoga, but yes. So like I was saying before, after I graduated, I was like super lost. I declined dentistry school, and I knew that I wanted to travel, and I honestly did know that I wanted to pursue dance, but I wasn't there yet. So then I moved to Australia, and then after my year in Australia, while I was in Australia as well, I had always also wanted to go to India and get my yoga and meditation like certification. And I wanted to go to India because it was like the birthplace of yoga, and I just wanted to have a spiritual experience. I wanted to like go all
Yeah.
in. And honestly, there was a moment in India as well that really like propelled me all the way to move to LA as well. But so I went there for a month and got my training, and it was like a full 1 month full experience, and it was honestly life changing. It was so transformational. And I always just kind of put that on like the side because then I went to LA and pursued dance. But then during COVID, so 2020, actually like even a bit before COVID started, I had this idea of doing this wellness program, and it was actually before COVID. And I just wasn't really sure yet like how I was going to incorporate that and tie it in. And then literally, I think 2 months later is when lockdowns happened during COVID. And so I was all of a sudden given this like time freedom to create this program, which I had literally been thinking about for at least like 4 months before. And at that time too, so because COVID happened, I was like, oh, like maybe this is the end of my dance career. I was really like questioning everything, like, okay, maybe this is the time that I start transitioning. But that's when I created my first program. And yeah, it was crazy. I just was like, I feel like I want to put this all together and like see what happens. And the response I got was, I still like can't even, it was crazy. It just like spread. There was word of mouth, like friends sending it to friends. It was just the coolest experience to see how it was helping people at that time. It was amazing.
I
Yeah.
did the 20, I think it was a
Yeah.
21-day program. It
Yeah,
was
yeah,
really
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Like I had, I remember it was during COVID, and
Yeah.
you had like associated like voice recordings for the meditations with it, and
Yeah.
they were really good. Like they were really,
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah. That's what was cool because that's what
I
I
love
got to
them.
tie like all my everything that I learned in India. I finally was like using it for the first time. But yeah, so there was like 21 meditations for each day, and it was like a morning ritual, a nighttime ritual, and then there
Yeah.
was all bunch of exercises to go through as well, like before you start the 21-day
Yeah.
challenge. Yeah. So it was really cool to start that.
So, talking about like manifestation, your
Hmm.
programs, how do you incorporate manifestation into your life? And like, how did it, if it's not too, I guess, touchy or personal, how did it affect your personal journey as like an entrepreneur and just like you as a person?
Yeah.
And to follow up on that, I know like at the beginning you mentioned that you wrote all your goals down and you
Mm,
like completed all of them. Is it as easy as that? Because I know there's so many things out there on social media. It almost becomes like too ritualistic, and like it's like a chore to
mm,
manifest
Yeah.
yeah.
sometimes. But you obviously did it correctly. So how did you do it? And like, yeah, like Fran said, like how do you incorporate it now into your daily
Yeah.
life?
So to be honest, like back then, manifestation was not even a word that I had heard about, and it wasn't popular at all. And like I said, it
Mm,
kind of all started like this was like 2000. I think it was 2014 when I wrote all these goals down. So like it was not talked about at all.
Hmm.
And it was all based off of this program that Lululemon kind of gave us. That's what I had not even heard about, like writing your goals down, about
okay.
success psychology. Like at the time, like it was, I mean, I had heard about writing goals, but this was like a whole, I remember being like, wow, eye opened for the first time. And so I
So it
wrote,
directly came from the Lululemon thing.
yeah, well, like my first time kind of being in this success psychology world, and
Okay, okay.
no one called it manifestation. Like my first time, I think I was 18 when I first heard about it. And I remember thinking like, why don't they teach this in school? Like this is crazy. Like why don't like this is
Yeah.
it's insane. Now I think it's really like widespread and all this. At least on like TikTok and social media, it's really, I think even since like the pandemic is when it I think really
Yeah.
caught fire, which is amazing thing. But I think there's a bit of like not knowing too much about something that kind of gives you just a beginner's luck sort of thing. And I think because at the time I resonate with what you're saying. I feel very overwhelmed with manifestation, social media, and all of that. And there's so many techniques and all that. And
Yeah.
all this to say, when I first did it, like I truly did just write out a 10-year vision. So at the time I was like, okay, what do I want my year to look, what do I want my life to look like 10 years in the future? And then I wrote 10-year goals, I wrote 5-year goals, I wrote 1-year goals. And that's like all in my program as well. And I remember writing it at the time. I was in Australia, and I did not think that any of these things were going to come true. I genuinely did not believe that any of this was going to come true. I just was like, oh, this is like what I'd love to happen. And like to the date of when I wrote, I'm going to sign with an agency in LA and get my visa, and to the date, like the exact date, it's come true. And I have had other,
Wow.
yeah, it was like, that is honestly of all, since then, that's like my craziest manifestation story to date for sure. Because the manifestation world really says you have to like fully like believe it, and
Yeah.
I didn't believe it at all. I think it was genuinely like I had finally claimed that I wanted it. I think the number one thing in manifestation is deciding, like fully deciding.
Mm,
And I claimed that I wanted it, but I didn't believe it was going to happen. But then it was almost like my subconscious and the universe, things were just like it just happened, and it made it
yeah.
happen.
You know what's hard too about like something you just said is like believing in it. I always like I will write down my goals or like write down something I want. And, all these books or whatever tell you like really feel it, believe in it. And I'm closing my eyes. I'm trying to feel it, and I'm just like, how do I feel something that didn't happen yet? So I think that part's hard, and also what you said about just like deciding. And it's almost like you had like a whimsical kind of moment where you're like, let me just like write all this down. You didn't think too hard about it. You're like genuinely like, let me just write what I
It's
want
kind of
down.
like being delusional. We've heard that so many times. Like you kind of just have to be delusional and just kind of like, okay, like kind of just, like it's like fairy dust and then it just comes true. But at the end of the day though, if it's aligned with what you're truly meant to do, like I do believe it
It'll
will
Yeah,
happen.
happen. Like
I agree.
regardless.
I agree as well. I think there a bit of it too is because I didn't even. It was like I wasn't too attached to it. I think I've experienced. What my biggest stuff right now, like in my learning lessons with manifestation, is because I know all the techniques and I teach it and all everything, and even in myself, like when I go through things, I think my newest struggle is that I want it so bad, and I do believe it. I'm like clinging to it so much And obviously we've heard that it's never going to happen when you're like clinging to it, right? And so I think why that happened too is I was just like, oh, like I would love for this to happen. That's amazing. Like I really would love this, but like I don't really think it will. And so there was just like non-attachment, and there wasn't that like desperation energy, like clinging to it. I think that had a lot to do with it as well. And just remaining positive, because I think like positive energy is definitely a huge part of it as well. But I think because I wasn't thinking about it too much. I wasn't giving that like desperate, clingy, obsessed energy. So it just
so
happened
true.
freely. Yeah.
Love that. Okay, I want to kind of this isn't on the outline, but I kind of wanted to get into some like rapid fire just based on everything you've said, because there's like so much through your whole career journey, personal journey, spiritual journey. Some advice, some like general advice for the people listening. When Whether you're like moving across the country, moving downtown Toronto, wherever you are, moving across the continent, kind of like you, what would be your number one piece of advice to not just give up and turn back right away? And
Mm.
I'm asking this because like I'm thinking about myself. If I were to move to pursue something that like I really, really desire and like leave all of this behind, I would have this constant like pit in my stomach and fear that it's not going to work out, that I almost just like feel like it won't. I don't know how to explain it. Like I just feel like I'd be so rooted in fear as opposed to like,
It's like
do you know what I'm trying to
self-sabotage.
say? Like I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
So what would
No.
your piece of advice be
Absolutely.
for
I think I would,
something like that?
yeah, 100%. I think my advice would be first, like, decide exactly what it is that you want, like, exactly, like, to the as detailed as possible, exactly what it is that you want. And then the next step I would think is get so into detail about why. Like, why do you want this? And, like, as detailed as possible again. So, like, let's say, like, for example, what's like a dream that you would want, Sam? Like, something like in that, like, it can be
Hon-
crazy. Or you can just do an example even.
Honestly, like if I could just drop everything and move somewhere where, whether it's LA, New York, wherever, where we have more opportunity to make this podcast kind of grow on a bigger scale and just do this full time, I would do that. But the constraints for me are like, I almost feel like I'm at this like age and point in my life where I've like built up so much responsibility at home that if I do that, all that's going to go to shit. And I've just
Right.
like,
Yeah.
so anyways,
So yeah,
not to
so
get into
no,
like
no,
a
no, you're
therapy
good.
sesh,
No,
but
no, I love it. So that's like that's what I would do. I would do like what exactly it is that I want. Like what is it that I want? Why do I want this? And then I would exactly kind of like what you said. Then the next step I would do is literally go through every single reason that I could come up with that would make me want to quit. That I think I would hate. That I think would like all the problems that could arise. Like anything that could come up that would literally make me question myself, make me not want to continue, and really brainstorm every single thing that could get in my way. And then honestly, really like on a really realistic level, like weigh the pros and cons, and if that's something you're willing to overcome, like are you willing to pay that price to accomplish that? And if you actually are, then like absolutely pursue it and go all in. And also think of, okay, like worst case scenario, if this all fails, like what is the worst case scenario? Like what will I do? And again, if you're okay with that as well. But then once you've focused on all those things, then like totally, and you've decided that you're willing to pay the price and that you're okay with the worst possible case scenario, then after that, like don't think
Leave
about
it.
those things. Yeah, like completely put that all to the side and go all in, and just keep reminding yourself of your why. Like your why is your most important. And I do actually really believe in like visualization, all of that. I think if you can get super clear on your why and get a really clear picture of like what that end result looks like, and if you can really get yourself into a really relaxed state and visualize that and get really attached to the feeling, like I really do think that it brings it into reality faster, for sure. The faster you can connect with it. Yeah.
That's honest. That's a really good exercise because like it
Yeah.
just lays it out for you. Like literally write it on a big sheet of paper and just like
Yeah.
that paper's there with you forever.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I've
Absolutely.
I've also like I've always said like your dreams are your dreams and not anyone else's dreams, because that's what's deeply aligned with like your version of reality. Like my exact dreams for myself aren't your exact dreams for yourself, or like
Yeah.
his exact dreams for himself, because like that's not they're not you're not meant to pursue that. I am, sort of thing. Does
Absolutely.
that make sense? I don't know. I've
Absolutely.
always thought that way.
Absolutely. It's also because I think we all have such different value systems and different priorities, right? And so to someone
Mhm.
else, like the priority, let's say like maybe they really do, maybe you prioritize being with your family and being in your hometown like more than pursuing a specific career, right? Maybe that actually, like
Yeah.
if you're really honest with yourself, that is actually a higher priority to me. And so I'm going to continue, like I'm going to prioritize that. And so it's not like all these things aren't for everyone. I think that's why really coming up with everything that
Yeah.
could make you want to quit, and just really figuring out your values, and okay, like does this really align with my values and what I prioritize and what I really truly want for my life. And because we all have like shiny object syndrome, right? Which like we can see, look at something and like, oh, I really want that, but are you really willing to pay the price to get that? Like, do you really want it that bad? And are you really willing to prioritize it over all these other things? And does that make the most sense
true.
for your life, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because everything looks very
that's-
great from the outside, of course, right? But then it's like, okay, what's going to get in my way? Like, what is that really going to look like? Yeah.
And how's it going to make me feel?
Yeah.
On the
So true.
daily.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good advice.
Food for thought.
Food for thought. I wanted to just to wrap up this manifestation talk and just personal
Yeah.
growth talk. Do you still have programs available that people can go? And I know you have a link in your bio.
Yeah.
Can we direct people to go there and
Yeah.
like try these things out for
Absolutely,
themselves?
absolutely. So I have like the original one that I first ever, that this one probably you did, Sam, is the 21-day wellness program. I call it the 21-day mindset program now, but that's like the original one that I first started during COVID. And then I also have a 21-day manifestation program, which is a bit more, the wellness program, they're both very similar in structure. It's like a morning ritual, nighttime ritual, daily meditations. But the wellness one is more, it's more broad. It's more about really like wellness and just like general well-being. And then the manifestation one is more geared if you want to like specifically manifest a specific thing and more techniques on that. And then I have a movement program as well, but that one's more, that one's kind of unrelated. It's every day there's a 5-minute movement program, and it's to get you really connected into your body and into your feminine energy.
I love that.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
it's
Me too.
We just talked about that on the podcast too, about how we've been feeling, I don't want to say I've been
No, me
feeling,
too.
you too?
Yeah.
Yeah. We've been feeling that like lately we just want to tap more into that feminine version of ourselves. Like a lot of the time we're similar in that we're so hard and like go to work, wake up, go to work, hustle. And like not that the feminine urge isn't to hustle, but I feel like the
Right.
feminine urge is to be more creative and like flow with things. And a lot of the time I just meet myself with resistance, I feel like on the day to day. So I have that craving lately to just like create and go with the flow and all of that. So this is really relevant to all of that
Yeah.
too.
Not even
Cool.
that. I just feel also with myself, like I'm so tense in my body. Like my body is just, I feel like a grandpa sometimes. Like I'll just be like shriveled up, like on my computer. And I'll look in the mirror, I'll be like, ew. Like I just like, you know what I mean? Like it's just not, I don't
Cute,
know
it's
how
not
to,
cute.
it's not cute. And I do want to like kind of just embrace my like femininity more and kind of
Yeah.
like, I've seen your videos of just moving and being like
Yeah.
open. So that's,
And I don't think you need to be a dancer to do them. I think
No.
you just need to
No.
be able to move your body. Like,
Absolutely, yeah. I specifically designed them for like non-dancers, for people that like
Yeah.
so that any age, like any level, like anyone can do them. But everything you were saying, Fran, is so true. It's like so many of us are just like we're, especially as women, we're not connected to our body at all. Like we're like on the computer, we're on our phone, we're not taking the time to really tune into our body. And I think, and that is a big part of feminine energy. Feminine energy is like the feeling, like you were saying, like the flow.
Yep.
It's not really in your head, it's really in your body. So it's taking that time to really like drop down, connect with your body, and like how is your body feeling, and just get coming home to yourself is what I like to call it. But yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
All right, well, you guys should definitely check out these
Yeah.
3 very different and very
Yeah.
valuable
we'll
programs.
plug them in our podcast description too.
Yeah.
So they can
Perfect.
click.
Thank you.
Last thing, if you can answer, very random, but who was either the most famous or the best or like your favorite person to dance on
for?
a music video for, on stage, whatever it is, if you can share. I know there's probably some like
Oh no, I can share for sure. But that's hard for me to answer because I think like the most famous, and I think the name that people like love that I say all the time is Snoop Dogg probably. But that wasn't
Oh my
but that wasn't necessarily like my favorite job. No, and not to say it was a great, like I loved it, but I think like some of my favorite experiences actually weren't necessarily for artists, because I've done like a lot of music videos, like Snoop Dogg, Megan Trainor, Tyga, J Balvin, things like that. But actually, my
J
favorite,
Balvin,
yeah,
wow.
my favorite was honestly doing a commercial for Adidas, and that wasn't like for, which is also pretty cool, but it wasn't necessarily for an artist, but it's because you got to be, I don't know, when you dance for an artist, sometimes you do feel like you're like background, or you're like kind of like, they're like secondary. So when you get to do a commercial and it's like they're using your talent, like I was getting to dance in like Adidas gear and stuff. So that was, it felt more.
That's cool.
Yeah, and
That
it
is
felt
so
for
more.
cool.
Adidas, that's really cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. That felt really fulfilling because it was like my talents and it was about me. And so, yeah, that was probably my favorite job by far. Yeah, the Adidas job.
Very interesting.
awesome.
Do you
Yeah.
have any last things? here?
I think
or
we covered it all. That was,
was
really, really good advice.
Oh,
Like, I want
thank
to go
you.
home now and write down.
I know. I just want to like
Go home in my bed with
honestly.
a tea and just write
I'm not
down.
even gonna
I
lie to
love
you.
it.
After the day I've had today, like
It
that
just
was
sounds relaxing.
that made me feel
Just-
better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
That was an awesome talk.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me. I love that. You definitely should do that. I love that. I feel the same way. I'm like, I feel like I need to just like regroup my thoughts right now after this conversation.
Yeah.
And in a good way.
It's like a therapy
Yeah.
session.
It's kind of like therapy.
Yeah, it is like therapy.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you again for coming on. I
Thank
know
you,
everyone's gonna really
girls.
love this episode. Very
Thank you.
vulnerable. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Thank you.
And yeah, make sure you like, share, subscribe, do all of
Comment.
that, comment, and all of that. And we will link all of the different programs that we talked about today in our bio. So go and check those
Thank
out.
you guys. Thank you. Thank you, girls. Thank you so much for having me. That was
Bye.
amazing. Mwah. Love you guys. Bye.